Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am the Whiskey Anorak and I'm going to be doing review 1C for you today. It's a bit windy where I am in the north of England and hopefully you can't hear that, but it's quite cosy in this bedroom that I'm in here. It's not quite a dedicated whiskey abode like some people have, but it'll do for me for now, and I might change it up in the future. I might put a table in front of me so you can see the bottles more easily, but this is very ad hoc, not very prepared, and I'm just trying to do a bit of an off the cuff, unedited style. Really, that's what I want to do because that's what I enjoy. Try not to focus too much on very detailed flavour notes, smell and taste notes, because I find that personally the least interesting and the least useful aspect of a whiskey review of the ones I've watched, because generally I'll smell and taste completely different things to them, although there will always be some points which are crossover. So there's definitely things that you could say are generic or at least general notes, so I'll try and stick to those, or maybe throw in a few of more specific individual ones to me, but I'll just try and keep to the basics to try and provide the useful information of roughly what it is. So this is review 1C. 1A was reviewing this, as I said, and then 1B was going into some further detail about Edradour distillery itself, and this is 1C, and I will be doing a comparison between this, and I already chose that I will be doing a comparison with this, which is Edradour 11-year-old PX cask, which is Pedro Jimenez sherry, bottled at 46%, relatively recent bottling. There's the bottle code on there, which they handily print for you. This is 11-year-old. It probably would have been good to compare the 10-year-old, but this is quite similar. It's bottled at the same strength. It's matured in sherry cask, which the 10-year-old standard Edradour is. And yeah, it just seems like quite a good comparison to the mostly bourbon cask Ballechin that I've got. I then put out the third option to a vote on just after I released review 1A, and I'll be doing that again next time as well after I do the two series of reviews. But the one that was actually chosen was actually the wild card, which I didn't expect. So if you look here, this one is the Ballechin 18. That was an option, which is an ex bourbon hogshead that was distilled around the same time as Edradour first started making Ballechin at the start of 2003. So it would have been good to compare to that because it's an older version of this, and it might just be my imagination, but I swear that the peat is quite a lot more intense than that. The percentage isn't that much higher, it's around 51% the ABV, but I do definitely get a more intense excuse me, peat smoke from that. The other one was the Laphroaig 10-year-old cask strength, and if it would have been up to me, I probably would have compared it to that, because it would have been good to compare Highland peat to Highland peat in here to the Isla peat in the Laphroaig. Highland peat being a lot more twiggy and earthy generally than the more coastal, salty, iodine-y, medicine-y Isla peat. But don't worry, at some point I will definitely be doing a comparison between Highland peat and Isla peat. That will definitely be happening. So the one that was voted for, and one person did vote, so thank you very much for that. I wasn't expecting any, so the fact that one person voted is better than zero, and as it's, you know, a democracy, the one with the most votes will win, and it was this one, which is from Mhoba Rum Distillery in South Africa. So it's definitely a bit different from the other two options, and it's actually different from a lot of the other rums that Mhoba produce as well. This is the only smoked one that they produce, and it's called Bushfire. It's bottled at 55%, and it's matured with sickle bush staves, which is a tree that's native to South Africa, and it's used in barbecues, in their version of barbecues, which they call braai. So that's part of the reason for the dark colour, because it is natural, and it just states that the only ingredients are the sugarcane juice and the congeners from the wood and water, and that's it. So definitely very much, it's a farm to bottle distillery. This is everything from the sugar cane being grown on site to the bottling is done all on the same quite small location. So that's pretty good in terms. It definitely gives Springbank a run for its money in terms of its integrity. So yeah, so that was the one that was chosen on the vote. So I've poured them out into glasses in front of me. So I've got the Ballechin here, I've got the PX Edradour here, and I have got the Mhoba rum here. So altogether we all like that. Now this isn't going to be a review of the Mhoba rum or the Edradour 11. It's not going to be a review. I will be reviewing them at some point individually. This is just a comparison, just to compare different things. So what I'm going to start by doing and reiterating something about the Ballechin 10-year-old, which I can't remember if I mentioned in that much detail in 1A or 1B, but it's not the most intense Ballechin for me. It doesn't have the stronger sulphury, slightly lactic and even small notes of rubber that I get in some of the other ones that make it a lot more intense. It definitely seems like dialed down. That could be the percentage, because I think every other Ballechin that I've got is over 50%. That could have something to do with it, and it is a point that Ballechin does retain its peat intensity even when it goes up to 18-20-year-old, no problem whatsoever in my experience. These you know, some of the older bottles can actually seem more intense than this, but that could have just been because of the production at the time, because it would, you know, it does vary, you know, the peating level does vary, because they state that it's a minimum of 50, so it can be a bit higher, and that might have happened when they were experimenting in the early days. But anyway, what I'm going to do is have a bit of a smell. So the peat has died off and I'm getting vanilla, oak, definitely getting a little bit of influence from sherry, a little bit of dried fruit on the taste. The peat does hit you straight away. It's oily, it's slightly sweet, salty, which goes to a sort of sour, bitter, which runs through. The sweetness remains, but it's a sour, bitter complexity that carries on with it. And yeah, more vanilla, more oak. And then on the aftertaste, which I prefer to call the aftertaste rather than the finish, because I think the finish can be a little bit, not misleading, but a bit unclear about exactly what it means, and it might mean different things to different people. But for me, you have the smell, you have the taste whilst it's in your mouth, and then after you swallow it, you have the aftertaste. And the aftertaste of this is malty, and it's like a fire that's gone out, like a stale smoke, and a bit of apple as well, like a fruity top note of apple that's left in the palate. So about 3 or 4 different flavours are left on the aftertaste. As I may have said in the previous reviews, I am not the sort of channel who focuses on very detailed flavour notes, like smell and taste notes, because for me, I find that the least interesting and useful part of reviews from other people. I want to know the basic flavours and sensations and the quality of the whiskey and a few assessments of that, but I don't need to hear 30 or 40 descriptors from someone saying what they smell, because I guarantee you I'll smell something different, and I always do, so I sort of switch off on those bits usually in videos. So I'm just trying, hopefully some other people feel the same and they don't want to listen to that. I could list things that I wrote down, but I guarantee you probably won't smell them, and it's limited use, so I'd rather just say the generic flavours, which I think are more universal, not completely, but more standard essentially. I'd rather focus on the detail of what's in the bottle generally. So okay, so the next logical one to compare it to would be the Edradour, which is produced at the same distillery. It's 11-year-old, so it's about 1 year older than the Ballechin. It's unpeated, and unlike the Ballechin, it's matured in solely sherry casks. Excuse me. Can you tell that it's from the same distillery? It's a decent question, and one that at first I definitely couldn't tell. Like if I would have been given a blind taste or smell test, I definitely wouldn't have been able to tell which one was which. As time's gone on, I have got a bit more used to that. I can definitely identify the Highland peat in the Ballechin. Because what tends to happen with the Ballechin is the peat does run the show a bit, and especially when it's at a younger age, in certain aspects, in the taste at least, not on the nose, but on the taste, it does tend to sort of run the show and take over, and it can be quite overpowering from the other flavours. You have to go looking for the other flavours. Whereas with the Edradour, it's a lot more easy to see. You don't have that smoke getting in the way. So on the nose for the Edradour, straight away you get the sherry, and it is similar to the sherry that I pick up on the nose on this and on the taste, like the dried fruit. Slightly sweet. Treacle. And definitely a bit of red fruit like strawberry as well in there. So taste. And sensation. Immediately sweet, then salty, and then a sour bitter sensation. Very similar in sensation to the Ballechin. And if you focus on that aspect, that's an easy way for you to try and compare the two without necessarily knowing, and to notice that the sensation is quite similar, even if the flavours are very different. So the flavour is definitely one dominated by dried fruit. It's got some sulphur components, it's heavy, it's got treacle, and it's got like dark toffee as well, like a bit of a butterscotch toffee. And it's definitely got a little bit of a floral bit on the nose as well, which I'm thinking is coming from the PX cask. It's like a sweet floral, like a sweet rose almost. In the aftertaste, you're left with an intense dried fruit and strawberry note. Basically, that's what I get. So it's something to note about Edradour that I find, which even though I've got bottles which are, you know, over 50%, over 60%, when it's reduced down to 46%, it's still very intense. It doesn't feel watered down. Some whiskies, when they're reduced, they do feel watery, particularly when you compare directly. And if I was to compare this to a cask strength bottling, then 100% I would be able to tell side by side, of course, because cask strength versions are very, very intense indeed, and can be super concentrated and need watering down quite a bit. But I don't find any deficiencies in this in terms of thinking it doesn't taste watered down. So that's something that's, you know, definitely in its favour. So next I will taste the Mhoba rum. So this is very estery, which means it's got a lot of overripe fruit notes to it. Very typical of, particularly of Jamaican rums, but Mhoba definitely produces rums in that kind of style. So initially you get an estery dried fruit, but there's an extreme woody, dark, tannic background to it, and the staves that have been used have definitely been having an intense effect, and that's definitely something you can see when you compare it to the other releases from Mhoba, which are not matured in the same way. Because what they do is they heavily char the staves that are in here, almost to the point of being charcoal, and then they put them in to the glass demijohns, which is like a large glass container. I think it's about 25-30 litres, something like that, and they leave it in there for, they've not disclosed the amount of time, but it's enough for it to have a significant impact and to change the rum quite significantly. So on the nose you get the overripe fruit, dark wood, barbecue, and definitely like a meaty intensity. And then on the taste, tannins, oak, ripe banana and pineapple, and there's definitely a grassiness towards the end, but it's very savoury. So sensation wise with this one, I think it's important to go into that. There's an astringent sweetness at the start, that turns into slight bitter, savoury. Bitter savoury, and you're left with a very savoury taste. Woody, savoury taste at the end. So it's very interesting, very different from the other two, from the Edradour and the Ballechin. So I think the next step is to compare the two in terms of smoke and intensity of smoke. So the smoke here, on the nose, it doesn't smell stale, although if you empty the glass nearly or leave it overnight and then come back and smell it once most of the alcohol's evaporated, you will definitely get an intense stale smoke. But on the nose it smells relatively fresh because you've got the fruit components coming through on the nose and the vanilla. In comparison to the Mhoba, it tastes so light, it doesn't taste heavy, but at the end of, on the aftertaste, it does have a bit more of a heavy smokiness, but the actual flavour in your mouth, it feels quite, it feels less oily than this. This feels like it's very oily in comparison. And this is by no means thin. It's sort of, in comparison to other Ballechin's, it's probably medium, I would say, in terms of oiliness. This is, of course, a higher percentage, so that is part of the reason, so you have to bear that in mind. But I do find generally Mhoba to be a very intense rum, and it's one that you have to take your time with and leave it in the glass for quite a while to get the best out of it. And certainly with this, if you do that, you will definitely get more out of it. So so let's compare the Edradour PX to the Mhoba. Whereas with the Ballechin and the Mhoba, you have a link in terms of the smokiness. You know, the smokiness here is very different. It's like a charred smokiness rather than a peat smoke, because peat has its own very distinctive taste. But there is, in terms of like phenols, which is the group family of chemicals which make up the smoky elements that you get in whiskies and other spirits, there is excuse me, there is that link between them where you can sort of see a correlation. When it comes to the Edradour and the Mhoba, they're just in different worlds, really. They're so different, and that's why I first sort of started getting into rum, as a lot of the rums are so different from Scotch whisky that there's no comparison. And if you want a bit of a break from whisky for a bit, something a bit different, there's so much to explore and so much variety within the rum world that you could literally, you know, even between different rums, there's so much difference. I've got quite a few bottles, probably about 30, and every one is, you know, different in its own way, particularly from different distilleries. So anyway, any similarities? There's some tannins in the Edradour 11, but this is like the tannins amped up to 11, basically. It's very tannic, and it might not appeal to most people, so that will be an interesting one to review when I finally get around to doing this one. But there is some similarity in terms of the tannic, and there is a little bit of darker fruits in this, which does correlate a little bit, but mostly they're just very, very different, and it's a bit of a learning experience to taste how different two spirits can be. And also very useful to compare how different two smoky spirits can be, because there's a lot of different types of smoke out there. And I will recover this in later reviews, where, you know, smokiness from mezcals is completely different, and earthiness, and also, you know, yeah, there's just a lot of different types of smoke out there, to be honest. And yeah, it's very interesting to compare. So I hope that was useful and not too rambling. Like I said, this is not a review of, you know, of the other two, of the Edradour and the Mhoba. I will be reviewing them at some point. I do think that they are worth to pick up, so I'm not going to say that I recommend them yet, but they're definitely high quality bottles, and generally I make sure that most of the bottles that I have are, because I do quite a lot of research on them. Not to say that I've never been caught out, but generally if you do your research in whiskey or other spirits, the rewards will sort of come back. Excuse me. So anyway, summarise finally, the Ballechin is sweet peat and stale smoke in terms of the smoke component, and the Mhoba is tannic, heavy, charred barbecue, coal smoke is how I would describe it, but it's intensely earthy as well in terms of the wood note, and very savoury. Excuse me. So that is my comparison. Next time I will be reviewing this, which is another Edradour, but don't worry, this is not the Edradour / Ballechin review channel. I will be mixing it up quite a lot after that, but there's a reason why I want to review this one. This is another relatively recent bottle as well, bottled at the end of 2025, and it's a charity bottle for the SCAA, which is the Scottish Charity Air Ambulance, which is a good charity. And excuse me, this is going to lead on to something I want to discuss in, so that's going to be 2A, it's going to be the review of this, which will be coming out on Sunday after this review goes live. And yeah, there's a few points that are related to this that I want to discuss in review 2B, and I won't say what it is yet, but hopefully that will be of interest to you. It won't be like a rant, but it will be my opinion on things. So yeah, hopefully my cough will be better by then. And yeah, thank you very much for your time, and stay tuned for more whiskey and spirit content. And I hope this was at least partially useful. Like I said, this is a bit of a work in progress, and hopefully it will get slicker as time goes on and things might change. But I will be posting the next review on Sunday, 2A. So please stick around for that. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.